Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The story begins with a highly advanced alien species, the Valari, a race that prides itself on its intellect, precision, and calculated approach to life. They are known for their peaceful society, where emotion is suppressed, and logic reigns supreme. The Valari leader, High Arbiter Selon, receives an invitation from the Federation of Galactic Species for an interspecies meeting with humanity. Though the Valari have little respect for human capabilities, they are intrigued by the growing influence of humans in the Galactic Council and decide to host the meeting at their magnificent home, a sprawling city built into the hollow of a gas giant. The Valari are both curious and dismissive of humans, believing their violent history makes them unworthy of respect. As the human delegation arrives, the Valari observe them with a mixture of skepticism and bemusement. They are prepared to deal with this primitive species as they have with countless others. But when the humans step into the Valari home, they are met with an unexpected reaction. The humans are excited, eager, and outspoken, and the Valari are taken aback by their energy. Selon observes the humans closely, but their behavior continues to unsettle them. Unlike other species, the humans seem unbothered by their surroundings, unafraid of the vast and alien architecture of the Valari home. They openly admire the structure, exclaiming in awe at its beauty. For the Valari, this is a place of calm, precision, and tranquility, but the humans' raucous joy makes it feel chaotic. During the first evening's dinner, the humans share stories of their violent history and wars they seem proud of surviving. The Valari are horrified. For them, violence is a distant concept, one that is far beneath their advanced civilization. The humans' ability to survive these horrors, through sheer tenacity, raw emotion, and adaptability, frightens the Valari who have lost any desire for struggle long ago. Tensions rise the next day as the human delegation tours the Valari home. In an attempt to entertain their guests, the Valari show off their most prized technological marvel, a complex neural interface that can manipulate physical objects with thought alone. However, when one human, a young soldier named Captain Rhea, attempts to touch the interface, a malfunction causes a massive disruption. The Valari system, unable to predict the human actions, almost collapses, triggering an emergency shutdown. The Valari are furious and frightened. The malfunction reveals the limits of their supposed perfection. Humans, with their raw unpredictability, have done what no other species could: caused chaos in the seemingly invincible Valari systems. The humans, however, take it in stride, apologizing but showing little true remorse. They seem unfazed by the damage they caused, only curious about what went wrong. This resilience, this unwillingness to be broken, starts to frighten the Valari even more. The incident forces the Valari to re-evaluate the humans. Selon, in private, speaks to the Valari Council. The High Arbiter expresses the growing unease. Humans may not be as weak as they first assumed, and their violent history could indicate a brutal, untamable nature. There is a growing sense of fear within the Valari. Meanwhile, the humans, unaware of the deeper concerns brewing in the Valari minds, begin to explore more freely, finding hidden corners of the Valari home and artifacts that are far older than anything in their own history. They are intrigued by the Valari's mastery of both technology and biology, and while they don't openly show fear or respect, they begin to realize the true depth of the Valari's power. However, things begin to take a darker turn. A small group of Valari begin to push for a more aggressive stance, suggesting that humanity's unpredictability could pose a threat. Tensions rise between factions of the Valari, while the humans remain unaware of the growing conflict. The unexpected happens when one human, Dr. Cashin Reed, an ambassador with a more philosophical outlook, shares a radical idea. He suggests that humanity's tendency toward chaos and violence might be a way to push the Galactic Council toward more drastic action that could secure humanity's place as a dominant force in the galaxy. Though Cashin expresses no malice, his words are misinterpreted by some within the Valari leadership as a direct threat. The Valari now begin to fear that humans are not only unpredictable but dangerous. The Council of Elders debates whether to imprison the humans or worse, eliminate them. In a desperate move, a faction of Valari extremists attempts to imprison the human delegation under the pretext of protection, sparking a diplomatic crisis. Key plot points. A human ambassador unknowingly stokes fears within the Valari by suggesting that humanity could exploit the chaos for power. A faction of Valari extremists takes drastic action, imprisoning the human delegation. Tensions erupt, and the Valari are on the brink of a major conflict with humanity. Part 6. The Unleashing of Humanity's Brutality. The humans, realizing the danger they are in, finally reveal their true nature. They are not afraid to fight back. The Valari have underestimated the raw power of humanity's instincts: survival, rage, and sheer willpower. Captain Rhea, alongside Dr. Reed and a few others, organize an escape, and the ensuing conflict within the Valari home is unlike anything the Valari have ever encountered. The Valari's advanced technology, while impressive, is no match for the humans' unpredictable, aggressive tactics. With every move, the humans disrupt Valari systems, turning their own technology against them in a brutal counterattack. The Valari are forced to face the truth: humanity is far more dangerous than they ever imagined. The once proud species is left reeling, their technological marvels useless against the primal power of human instinct. In the end, the humans take control of the Valari home, and though they do not destroy the Valari, they send a clear message: humanity is not to be underestimated. The story ends with a quiet but powerful reflection from Celan. The Valari had lived their lives in perfect order and control, but they had failed to understand that sometimes, chaos is not something to be feared, it is something to be respected. This outline builds suspense and drama around the clash between two very different species, ultimately showcasing humanity's raw power and adaptability in the face of a superior, yet fragile alien race. Celan watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern as the human delegation entered the grand hall of the Valari residence. The sweeping architecture, the glowing crystalline walls that pulsed with soft blue light, and the serene, almost dreamlike atmosphere of the space were all carefully designed to invoke a sense of peace. But as the humans entered, they carried with them an energy that seemed to challenge the very calm that the Valari had worked centuries to perfect. The humans were loud in their laughter, loud in their exclamations of awe. They moved through the space with an uninhibited curiosity, peering into alcoves, brushing their hands against walls, and speaking to each other in rapid, excited voices. For the Valari, such behavior was a foreign concept. Their society had long since moved beyond this chaotic kind of exuberance. They had evolved into a species driven by logic, control, and a precise understanding of their place in the universe. The humans, in contrast, were wild, unpredictable, and, despite their relatively primitive status in the galactic order, remarkably resilient. Celan couldn't help but stare at them. There was a certain beauty in their rawness, in their unabashed enthusiasm. But there was also a deep disquiet in the air. The Valari had always prided themselves on being masters of their environment, of being the architects of order in the cosmos. Now, in the presence of these creatures from a distant world, they felt a creeping unease that they couldn't easily suppress. As the humans gathered in a large room, the Valari prepared the first evening's meal. It would be a gesture of hospitality, an offering of their most refined dishes to honor their guests. But even as they arranged the elaborate table, Celan could feel the tension in the air. There was something in the way the humans moved, the way they spoke to each other, that hinted at a simmering intensity, a wildness that the Valari could not place. The dinner began without incident. The humans sat, eagerly eyeing the intricately plated dishes placed before them. The Valari, ever composed, waited for their guests to begin. The food was exquisite. Delicate flavors balanced with precision, perfectly engineered for the refined palates of their guests. But the humans didn't seem to notice the artistry. Instead, they dug in with an unrefined enthusiasm that both astonished and repelled the Valari. "This is incredible," one of the humans, a burly man with a beard, exclaimed as he shoveled food into his mouth. "I've never had anything like this before." Another human, a woman with short, dark hair, leaned forward. "You have no idea what it means to survive in the harshness of space. You never know if you're going to make it to the next planet or even the next system. It's constant struggle, constant fighting to survive. And we've survived. Against all odds. We've fought our way through it all." The room fell silent. The Valari exchanged uneasy glances. The humans were speaking of war, of conflict, of struggle. These were not concepts that the Valari were accustomed to. In their long history they had risen above such things. Their society had evolved beyond the need for violence, for conflict. They had achieved perfection, or so they thought. To hear the humans speak so casually of their brutal history unsettled them. One of the Valari, a young philosopher named Iluna, spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "You speak of war and survival as though it is something to be celebrated. But war is chaos. It is a breakdown of order. It is the destruction of life, of what we have worked so hard to build. What is the value of survival if it comes at such a cost?" The human woman who had spoken earlier, Captain Rhea, as Celan later learned, did not flinch at the criticism. Instead, she smiled, though it was a smile edged with something darker, something that Selion could not fully decipher. "You misunderstand," she said, her voice low but full of conviction. "Survival is not about destruction. It's about resilience. It's about pushing through the impossible, about coming out on the other side stronger. Our wars, our struggles, they made us who we are. They forged us into a people who never give up, no matter the odds. We fight because we have to. And because we can." Celion's mind raced. The Valari had long since abandoned the notion of struggle. They had perfected their society, built a utopia founded on peace, intellect, and control. They had no need for conflict, for fighting. The idea that the humans could view war as a test of strength, as a means of self-improvement, was incomprehensible. "You speak as if fighting is an intrinsic part of your identity," Eluna pressed, her tone sharpened by the growing tension. "But have you never wondered what you might become if you chose peace instead? What could you accomplish if you didn't rely on the brutality of conflict to define your survival?" For the briefest moment, Captain Rhea seemed to hesitate, her expression unreadable. But then she shrugged, a movement that seemed to dismiss the question entirely. "Maybe we don't need to choose. Maybe we can have both. Peace when we can get it. But when peace fails, we fight. We don't let anything stand in our way." The room was silent for a long moment. The Valari, ever the paragons of restraint, struggled to process the weight of her words. To them, peace was not simply a choice, it was a way of life, the very foundation of their society. And here, in the presence of these humans, it seemed as though peace was merely an option to be discarded when it became inconvenient. The sheer confidence with which they spoke of violence and conflict was both terrifying and fascinating. "Your survival, your resilience," Selion said, finally breaking the silence. "It is impressive. But I fear you may be too focused on the struggle itself, rather than the peace that can be achieved once the struggle ends. Without peace, there can be no true order, no lasting stability." Captain Rhea met his gaze, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "Perhaps," she said softly. "But peace without strength is just an illusion. And we don't live in illusions. We live in a universe where you must fight to keep what you've earned. And if that means being brutal, then so be it." There was something in her words that unsettled Selion more than he cared to admit. This was not the first time they had encountered a species with a violent past, but it was the first time they had encountered one that not only accepted their brutal history but reveled in it. The Valari had built their society on the belief that intellect and precision would bring about an eternal peace. But these humans seemed to thrive on chaos, on the very elements that the Valari had sought to eliminate. And yet, there was something undeniably compelling about their spirit, their unyielding drive to survive, to endure. In that moment, Selion realized that the humans might not be as primitive as they had first believed. They might be more dangerous than they could ever have imagined. The thought sent a chill down his spine. As the meal continued, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the weight of what had been said lingered in the air. Selion knew that this was only the beginning. The humans were unlike anything the Valari had ever encountered. And while they might appear to be a curiosity at first, there was a dangerous unpredictability about them that could not be ignored. The night ended uneventfully, but Selion could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. The humans, despite their seeming chaos, had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, the Valari were not as invincible as they had always believed. The following day dawned with an unsettling quiet that hung in the air of the Valari residence. The grand halls of the city, which had once echoed with the soft hum of advanced machinery, now seemed almost oppressive. The walls, once aglow with the tranquil pulse of artificial light, appeared colder than usual. Selion stood in the observation chamber, gazing out at the swirling mists of the gas giant, deep in thought. The humans' words from the night before still echoed in his mind. Their unabashed defiance, their belief in the necessity of conflict. It was anathema to everything the Valari held dear. As the morning progressed, Selion found it increasingly difficult to ignore the growing tension. The humans too had sensed it. They roamed the halls, seemingly unaware of the unease that clung to the atmosphere, their every action somehow disrupting the pristine order of the Valari home. It was during the afternoon tour of the Valari's greatest technological marvel, the neural manipulation interface, that the calm facade finally shattered. The interface was a masterpiece of Valari engineering, an intricate network of neural pathways woven into the very fabric of the residence. It allowed users to manipulate physical objects simply by thinking, channeling their thoughts through the neural pathways to exert control over the world around them. For the Valari, this was the pinnacle of achievement, the perfect union of biology and technology. They had used it for centuries to shape their world with unparalleled precision. Celion had invited the humans to observe the interface, a gesture meant to show the heights of Valari achievement. He had hoped that by witnessing such a demonstration, the humans would come to appreciate the delicate balance the Valari had achieved in their society. But what Celion had not accounted for was the reckless curiosity of the humans, and their utter disregard for the dangers that came with such a powerful tool. It was Captain Rhea who first approached the interface, her eyes wide with wonder. "So, you just think about what you want and it happens?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Celion nodded, maintaining a composed exterior. "Yes. It is a system that requires a great deal of discipline. The slightest miscalculation can have disastrous consequences." Rhea grinned, her eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and challenge. "Sounds like a challenge. You sure it's safe?" Celion's gaze narrowed. He had intended the demonstration to be a simple, controlled experience, but the humans had a way of turning everything into a test. "I would advise caution. The interface is not a toy. It requires focus and respect for its capabilities." But Rhea was already reaching out, her fingers brushing lightly against the interface's surface. Celion's voice faltered as he realized too late what she was about to do. Before anyone could react, the system powered up with a low hum. A ripple passed through the air, the neural pathways glowing bright as Rhea's mind interfaced with the machine. The delicate balance of the Valari's technology shifted, and for the first time in centuries, chaos took root in the Valari home. A violent surge of energy erupted from the interface, the air crackling with raw power. The walls of the chamber trembled as the delicate neural pathways within the system started to fray under the strain of an unintended connection. Panels of smooth crystal splintered, glowing with unstable energy, and a series of alarms blared throughout the building. "Shut it down?" Celion's voice rang out, but it was too late. The Valari technicians scrambled to intervene, their efforts frantically directed toward containing the surge, but the humans, particularly Rhea, seemed unfazed by the escalating disaster. For a brief moment, Rhea remained motionless, her eyes locked on the interface. Then, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, she snapped out of her trance and jerked her hand away. But the damage had already been done. The neural system that had once been so flawlessly attuned to the Valari's minds was now in disarray. Sparks of electrical energy danced along the walls, and the entire structure seemed to groan under the pressure of the uncontrolled energy. The Valari technicians, their faces pale with terror, struggled to regain control. Celion rushed forward, his heart racing. The sense of order, of control that had always been the Valari's foundation, was slipping through his fingers. What was once a symbol of their perfection had become a twisted mockery of chaos, a disaster waiting to unfold. "Get them out of here," one of the technicians shouted. His voice was shrill, panic evident in every syllable. "This place is going to collapse." The humans, unfazed, exchanged glances. Captain Rhea stepped forward, her expression still one of calm amusement despite the rising danger. "We didn't break it on purpose," she said, her voice oddly comforting despite the crisis. "We were just curious. Curiosity nearly destroyed our home." Celion snapped, his voice rising. His normally composed demeanor was shattered, his words laced with frustration and anger. "Do you not understand the consequences of your actions?" Rhea's grin faltered, but only slightly. "Look, I didn't mean for this to happen. We're not used to this kind of technology. Back home we have to fight for everything. We don't have things that just work perfectly all the time." The comment hit Celion like a physical blow. He had always known that the humans were a violent species, but he had never fully grasped the implications of their history. They fought, they struggled, and in doing so they survived. They had adapted to the chaos of their own making. But to the Valari that kind of disorder was unnatural, anathema to everything they had built. The hum of the interface finally died down, but the damage was done. The energy fluctuations had caused a series of critical failures across the Valari systems. Lights flickered, control panels short-circuited, and the once perfect harmony of the residents now felt like a fragile illusion, barely held together by the thinnest of threads. "You've done enough," Celion said, his voice dangerously calm. His hands trembled at his sides as he struggled to regain control of the situation. "You will leave immediately?" "But," Rhea started, but Celion's glare silenced her. "No more words. You will leave and we will fix this, if we can." The human delegation fell silent. Their earlier nonchalance had disappeared, replaced by an air of reluctant understanding. Rhea stepped back, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in Celion's anger. She said nothing, but for the first time she seemed to grasp the gravity of what had occurred. The Valari technicians rushed in, their focus now entirely on repairing the damage, while the humans were escorted from the room. But even as they left, a new tension hung in the air. The Valari had always prided themselves on their ability to control, to perfect their world. But in one reckless act, the humans had exposed the fragility of that control. They had reminded the Valari of something they had long since forgotten, that in the face of chaos no system, no matter how advanced, was truly invulnerable. As the human delegation was escorted out, Selion stood in the ruined chamber, staring at the now glowing neural interface. His heart pounded in his chest as the implications of what had just happened began to settle in. These humans were not the fragile, primitive beings the Valari had assumed them to be. They were something else entirely. Something dangerous. And yet, as he gazed at the flickering remnants of the damaged system, a nagging thought stirred in the back of his mind. Perhaps it was not destruction they had wrought, but a glimpse into a power that was far greater than the Valari had ever anticipated. Selion stood alone in the aftermath, the once glorious chamber now a shadow of its former self. Sparks crackled intermittently from the shattered interface as technicians moved in and out of the room, their movements brisk and urgent. Despite their efforts to restore control, the air was heavy with failure, the kind of failure that the Valari were unaccustomed to. Their society had thrived for millennia on perfection, on absolute control. But the humans had shown them that control could be fleeting, fragile, and perhaps even meaningless. As the repair crews worked tirelessly to undo the damage, Celion's mind raced. How could they have misjudged the humans so thoroughly? They had underestimated their recklessness, their resilience, and most alarmingly, their ability to disrupt even the most advanced systems with such seeming ease. And in doing so, the humans had revealed something deeper, a force that the Valari had never truly considered, a force born not of intellect but of raw, unrestrained will. It was an unsettling thought. The Valari had never been a people of force. Their evolution had led them to a life of balance, intellect, and calm. They had risen above the primal struggles that defined so many other species, leaving behind conflict and chaos in favor of refinement. Their technology, their society, their very philosophy had been built on the belief that order was the highest form of existence. The humans, on the other hand, were creatures of fire and fury, driven by instinct, by passion, and by an unyielding need to survive, no matter the cost. And it was this very force of will that had caused the damage in the first place. As the hours passed, Selion found himself once again in the grand hall, gazing out through the transparent walls at the sprawling city. The glowing lights of the Valari capital shimmered like distant stars, each building, each structure, a testament to their centuries of peaceful development. But beneath the surface of this pristine society, something had shifted. The calm veneer had cracked, and now, like the neural system they had so carefully crafted, the foundations of their world seemed brittle, fragile. "Your Excellency," Iluna's voice cut through his thoughts. She stepped into the room, her eyes filled with concern. "You should rest. The damage is being repaired. It will take time, but it will be restored." Selion turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "The damage goes beyond what can be fixed with repairs, Iluna. The breach in the system, it's not just a malfunction. It's a reflection of something deeper. Something we cannot control." Iluna raised an eyebrow, clearly puzzled. "You speak of the humans, don't you?" "Yes," Selion replied, his voice low and heavy with the weight of his realization. "They are unlike anything we've encountered before. Their entire existence is built around a kind of force that we have no experience with. It's raw primal. And in their presence, I can't help but wonder if we've been deluding ourselves all this time." Iluna stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Selion sighed, running a hand through his silvery hair. "The humans have an incredible drive to survive, no matter the odds. They don't rely on perfect systems or controlled environments like we do. They rely on something else, their will, their refusal to give in. I've seen it in the way they move, the way they think. They fight even when it seems impossible. They survive against all odds, not because of their intellect but because they refuse to surrender. And it frightens me, Iluna. It frightens me more than I care to admit." Iluna looked at him with a mixture of empathy and understanding. "You're afraid that their survival instinct, their chaos, is something we can't control. But is that not what we feared all along? That perhaps our perfect system would one day meet a force that would be beyond us? We've never truly tested our limits, Selion. Perhaps we need to." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The Valari had always believed that their way of life was the pinnacle of existence. They had never questioned their superiority, until now. In the wake of the humans' actions, Selaun found himself questioning everything he had once believed to be certain. He turned away from Illuna, his gaze focused on the horizon. The humans have disrupted more than our technology, Illuna. They've disrupted our very understanding of power. They've shown us that it's not enough to build a perfect system. You need more than control. You need strength, the kind that comes from surviving against everything that should have destroyed you. Illuna remained silent for a long moment before speaking again. Then perhaps we need to understand them better. If we are to coexist, we must learn what drives them. We must find a way to temper that raw force or it will consume us. Selaun nodded, a slow, thoughtful motion. Yes, but how? How do you temper something as untamable as the human spirit? Before Illuna could respond, a figure appeared in the doorway, Captain Rhea. Her presence was a stark contrast to the calm and order of the Valari, like a storm breaking through the stillness. She stepped into the room with confidence, her gaze unwavering as she met Celian's eyes. You've been avoiding me, Rhea said, her voice even but with a hint of challenge. Celian's eyes narrowed, but he made no move to dismiss her. I have no interest in further discussion at this time, Captain Rhea. The damage you caused. I know, she interrupted, her voice tinged with an emotion that was neither contrite nor defensive. And I'm sorry for what happened. But you're not wrong, you know. We didn't break your systems on purpose, but maybe we're not the ones who need fixing. Maybe you do. Selaun took a step forward, his eyes cold. What are you implying? Rhea met his gaze without flinching. I'm saying you've built something so perfect, so controlled, that it can't survive outside of its own bubble. You've created a world where nothing can touch you, where everything is predictable. But what happens when something unpredictable comes along? Like us. We don't live in bubbles. We live in the real world where anything can happen at any time. You can't plan for everything, Selaun. And when you try, you lose your edge. The word struck Selaun like a slap, the force of her accusation hitting deep. So you think chaos is the answer? That we should embrace it? I think you need to start living with it, Rhea said, her voice steady. You can't control everything. And maybe you don't need to. But if you want to survive, you have to learn how to adapt, to fight when it matters, and to not be afraid when things get messy. Selaun stood motionless for a long moment, the weight of her words pressing on him. He had always believed that control was the answer, that peace could only be achieved through order. But now, in the presence of this human, he wondered if that belief had blinded him to something far more complex. Maybe, he said slowly, his voice quieter than before, you're right. Perhaps we've been too focused on perfection and not enough on resilience. Perhaps we've forgotten what it means to survive, to fight when necessary, to face the unknown and adapt. Rhea's expression softened, though only slightly. I don't expect you to agree with everything we do. But maybe you should start asking yourself if what you've built is enough to survive a future where nothing is certain. The silence that followed was heavy, but in it, Selaun found the first inkling of understanding. The humans were unpredictable, chaotic, and yet, it was their very chaos that made them strong. The Valari had built a perfect society, but in doing so, they had left themselves vulnerable to a kind of power they could never have anticipated. For the first time, Selaun wondered if perfection was truly the goal. The days that followed were a blur of activity. The Valari technicians worked tirelessly to restore the neural interface, the once stable network now in ruins. While the repairs continued, Selaun found himself distracted, caught in a web of questions that refused to let go. The humans, Rhea and her crew, were far from what he had imagined. Their ability to survive, to push forward in the face of destruction, was something the Valari had never fully understood. It wasn't just their reckless abandon, it was their refusal to bend, even when faced with adversity. Selaun had always believed that power came from control, from the ability to predict and maintain order. But now, in the wake of the chaos they had caused, he wondered if the human approach had its own kind of strength, one born not of perfection but of resilience. Excellency, Iluna's voice broke through his thoughts. She stepped into the room, her expression serious. The repairs are proceeding, but there's something else you should see. Selaun didn't answer immediately, his eyes lingering on the fractured interface. There were cracks in it, not just in the technology but in his own understanding. It was as though the very fabric of the Valari way of life had been disturbed, and he wasn't sure how to mend it. The world outside the chamber, with its pristine streets and towering spires, felt distant and alien now. What is it, Iluna? Selaun finally asked, his voice distant. She gestured for him to follow her. Without another word, Selaun rose and followed her down the long hallways of the Valari home, Past the smooth walls, the quiet hum of machines working in the background. They reached a smaller, less polished chamber near the back of the complex, a room Selan had only visited a few times. Inside, a large screen glowed softly, displaying an array of data. "These are the humans' communications," Aluna said. "They've been sending messages back to their ship, but what's most concerning is the nature of these transmissions." Selan moved closer, his sharp eyes scanning the data. There were transmissions from Rhea, but also from the rest of the crew. Messages filled with calculations, coordinates, and plans for something larger than Selion had anticipated. "What are they planning?" he asked, his voice now edged with a tinge of concern. Iluna's fingers danced across the controls, pulling up more data. "They've been gathering intelligence. Information on our systems, our weaknesses. They're preparing for something. It's not a simple diplomatic mission, Selon. They're not here just to observe." Celian's pulse quickened. The humans, ever unpredictable, had always been an enigma. But now it seemed that they were more than just an external threat. They were a force in motion, and he had failed to recognize their true intentions. "They're preparing for war," he muttered, his mind racing. "And we've been too blind to see it?" Iluna didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied the data, her expression becoming more grave. "They've been here for weeks, gathering resources, studying our infrastructure. They've learned how to bypass some of our security measures. We've underestimated them, Excellency. And now it seems they are preparing to make their move." A cold shiver ran down Celian's spine. The Valari had always prided themselves on their technological superiority, their ability to defend themselves from any threat. But they had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that thrived on unpredictability, that adapted and survived in ways the Valari had never considered. "How long do we have?" Selan asked, his voice sharp. "Not long," Iluna replied. "We can't be certain, but I suspect their next move is imminent." Selan turned toward the door, his mind already spinning with strategies and contingencies. The Valari had lived for millennia without ever having to truly fight for survival. Their society had been one of intellect and peace, of careful precision and controlled systems. But now they were facing something that had the potential to shatter that peace. He had to act quickly. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, Captain Rhea stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the view screen. Her fingers danced over the controls, reviewing the last few pieces of intel they had gathered. It had taken weeks, but they were finally ready. The Valari had shown their hand, and now it was time to play theirs. "Everything's set," Rhea said, turning to her crew. "We've gathered all the data we need. Their security is strong, but we've found enough vulnerabilities to make our move. It's not just about breaking their systems anymore. We've learned everything we can from their tech. Now we turn the tables." One of her officers, a young man named Jace, looked up from his console, his face pale. "Captain, are you sure about this? I mean, we're talking about the Valari. We're not dealing with just any species. These people have been around for eons. They're not going to take this lightly." Rhea gave him a steady look. "I know. But we didn't come here to play by their rules. We came here to show them that we're not just survivors, we're fighters. And it's time we start showing them what that really means." Jace hesitated but then nodded. He knew better than to question Rhea once she made up her mind. The humans had never been afraid of taking risks, and that was what had kept them alive through every battle, every struggle. They fought when it seemed impossible, and they never gave up. But even Rhea could feel the weight of what they were about to do. The Valari had always been peaceful, controlled. A species that had never known true conflict. Their existence had been built on the idea that peace could be maintained through perfection, through stability. But now the humans were going to shatter that illusion. Rhea turned back to the screen. "Prepare the ship. We're going to move fast. We hit them where it hurts the most, at the core of their technology. We'll bring down their systems one by one, and when they finally realize what we're doing, it'll be too late." Back at the Valari residence, Celian's mind raced. He had to act, and he had to act now. The humans were coming, and there was no telling how far they were willing to push this. The Valari had always prided themselves on their ability to predict the future, to control the present. But now, as the shadow of the unknown loomed closer, Selan realized how much they had taken their peace for granted. Iluna stepped forward, breaking his thoughts. "Excellency, we need to prepare a defense. We can't afford to wait for them to strike first." Selion nodded grimly. "Send out a message to the council. We need to begin the lockdown procedures immediately. If the humans are preparing for an attack, we must be ready. We cannot afford another mistake." He paused, his gaze distant. "But this time we need to fight back. We need to show them that the Valari are not a people to be trifled with." They want to see chaos? Let's give them a taste of it. On the human ship, Rhea looked out at the swirling gas giant. Get ready, she said. This is where it all begins. The time for diplomacy was over. The Valari had failed to see the humans for what they were. Now it was time for the humans to show them the true meaning of survival. The room was still, save for the soft hum of machines working tirelessly to prepare for the conflict that was about to unfold. On the Valari homeworld, Celion stood at the central command desk, his eyes fixed on the holographic map that displayed their planetary defenses. He had never felt more vulnerable nor more alive. The situation was spiraling out of control and there was no turning back now. The humans, unpredictable and relentless, had already begun their assault. A series of minor disruptions to their network systems had evolved into something far more dangerous. Every passing hour brought new reports, shifting patterns in their energy readings, a sudden drop in communications from the outer defenses, and reports of sabotage across key infrastructure. The Valari had failed to prepare for this kind of assault, a kind of guerrilla warfare that blurred the lines between military and psychological warfare. The humans weren't just attacking their technology, they were attacking their sense of security, their very belief that they could never be vulnerable. Excellency, the first wave is approaching. Iluna's voice broke into Celion's thoughts, pulling him back to the present. She stood beside him, her hands poised over the controls, but her gaze mirrored his, equal parts determination and fear. Activate the outer defense grid. We will stop them before they can get any closer, Celion ordered, his voice steely. Iluna nodded and began issuing commands, her fingers a blur over the interfaces. She turned back to him after a moment, her expression grim. It's not enough, Excellency. The humans have already infiltrated the secondary defenses. Our grid is compromised. A wave of cold dread washed over Celion. The Valari had always prided themselves on their impenetrable systems. To have those systems breached so easily was a humiliating blow. He had underestimated the humans and now he would pay the price. Then we must act swiftly. Mobilize the elite guard. Send them to the primary core. We can't afford to lose control now. As the order was passed through the ranks, Celion's mind raced, calculating his next move. The humans, with their unyielding drive and chaotic tactics, had thrown the Valari into turmoil. What had started as a diplomatic mission had escalated into an all-out struggle for survival. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, Captain Rhea surveyed the battlefield from her command center. Her crew was working in a frenzy, but Rhea remained calm. She had trained for this moment her entire life. No one knew the art of war quite like the humans. Report, Rhea barked, her voice commanding yet steady. Lieutenant Jace, still looking uncertain but resolute, gave her the update. We've successfully breached their outer defenses. The first wave of infiltration has gone according to plan. Their security systems are struggling to keep up. We've jammed communications and we're now moving into Phase 2. Rhea's lips curled into a tight smile. Phase 2. It's time to hit them where it hurts. The Valari capital was a monument to centuries of peace and technological perfection. But now, beneath the pristine exterior, cracks were beginning to show. Every step the humans took further inside the Valari's world felt like an invasion into their very identity. Celion paced the war room, his thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting strategies. He had trusted that his people's technology would protect them, that they would be untouchable. Now, with the humans attacking at multiple points, he found himself questioning everything he had ever believed in. Their chaotic nature, their refusal to be beaten, was something the Valari had never considered. The idea of confronting an enemy who didn't think, didn't calculate, they simply acted, was alien to Celion. But it was also terrifyingly effective. I've just received confirmation, Iluna said as she stepped into the war room. They've breached the primary power core. We're losing control over the energy grid. The system will overload if we don't regain control soon. Celion's heart skipped a beat. If they lost the power core, it would be more than just a tactical defeat. It would be a blow to the very heart of their civilization. The entire planet relied on that core for stability, for everything from communications to the very fabric of their society. Divert all available forces to the core. We cannot let them gain control of it, Celion ordered, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. Iluna's eyes were wide with alarm. We're already sending every available unit, but we don't have time to argue, Celion cut in, his voice sharp. This is a matter of survival. In the heart of the Valari capital, a massive power core sat nestled within a complex structure of reinforced walls and advanced shielding. It was the lifeblood of the Valari civilization, the hub from which all their technology emanated. The humans knew this. and they were coming for it. Rhea, standing at the helm of her ship, watched the holographic display that showed the core's location. They had expected resistance, but the Valari were slower to react than they had anticipated. Their systems were broken, their soldiers confused. It was almost too easy. "Prepare for Phase 3, Rhea said coldly, her voice low but full of purpose. Jace looked up from his console. "Are you sure about this, Captain? If we overload the core, we'll take the entire city down with it. There's no turning back once we do this." Rhea's expression was unreadable. "We didn't come here to negotiate with them, Jace. We came here to show them what happens when you think you're untouchable. If we need to destroy their city to win, then so be it." She didn't like the idea of causing unnecessary destruction, but in her mind there was no other choice. The Valari had not only refused to see them as equals, they had mocked them, belittled their survival instincts. Now they would learn the consequences of that mistake. Celian's heart pounded in his chest as he made his way to the central control room. Iluna, at his side, was silent, her face tight with the strain of the ongoing battle. The sounds of the fight outside were faint, but there was no mistaking the urgency in the air. "The human forces are closing in," Iluna said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and concern. "They've breached the second defensive line. We can't hold them much longer." "Keep the core stable," Celion commanded, his mind laser-focused. He had to maintain control over the power core or they would lose everything. But as he reached the control room, his heart sank. The doors to the main chamber were wide open, and the chamber was empty, except for the glowing, humming power core at its center. Iluna stepped forward cautiously. "What's happened? Where are our guards?" Celion didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the core's readings. The power output was rising rapidly. "Far too fast." "They're inside," Celion muttered, the realization hitting him with brutal force. The humans had infiltrated the core directly. They weren't just attacking, it was an all-out strike. A strike meant to cripple them at their most vulnerable. He spun on his heels. "We need to stop them now." Back in the heart of the Valari capital, Rhea stood in the shadows, watching the lights flicker. She had done it. They had done it. The core was theirs now. "Prepare the detonation sequence," Rhea ordered, her voice calm but tinged with satisfaction. The human crew moved with practiced efficiency. A countdown began. It was a simple procedure: redirect the energy from the core and trigger a collapse. The entire city, the heart of Valari civilization, would fall. And just as she was about to initiate the final sequence, her communicator buzzed. "Captain Rhea," the voice crackled through the speaker. "We have incoming." Rhea's eyes narrowed as she turned to the display. On the horizon she could see them, the Valari elite guard, storming toward their position. It was the last defense. They were coming for the core. And they were not going to let the humans win so easily. "Get ready," Rhea whispered to herself. The final phase was about to begin. The sky over the Valari capital had turned an unnatural hue as the battle raged on beneath it. The once pristine streets, shimmering with the glow of the city's artificial sun, were now filled with the sounds of conflict. Explosions, sirens, the roar of military engines, sounds the Valari had never imagined would echo through their peaceful world. Yet here they were, fighting for their survival against an enemy they had so gravely underestimated. In the heart of the chaos, Celion stood at the control center, his hands gripping the console, his mind running through countless calculations. The power core, once the pride of the Valari civilization, was now teetering on the brink of collapse. The humans had breached it, redirecting its energy to destabilize it, and now the countdown to total meltdown was in full swing. "Excellency," Iluna's voice broke through his frantic thoughts. She stood beside him, sweat beading on her forehead, her eyes betraying the weight of the situation. "We've got less than 15 minutes before the core detonates. We need to act now or the entire city will be wiped from existence." Celian's mind raced. He had prepared for a number of outcomes but never for this. The Valari had always prided themselves on their technological supremacy, their ability to outthink and outmaneuver any threat. But the humans, they didn't play by the rules. They fought with a ferocity that was born not of technology but of spirit. They didn't care about the systems or the rules that govern the universe. They cared only about survival, and they would do anything to ensure it. "Shut down the core," Celion barked, his voice filled with urgency. "Override their control. Find a way to stop the countdown." Iluna's fingers flew over the control panels, her face grim. "I'm trying, but their system is designed to block all outside interference. We'll need direct access to their terminals to override it. If we don't get in there now, it will be too late." Celion cursed under his breath. "Then we'll go in ourselves." Assemble the guard. We move out in 5 minutes? Meanwhile, on the other side of the capital, Captain Rhea stood before her crew, her expression cold as she watched the countdown on the screen. The city's power core was moments away from total collapse. The Valari had no way of stopping them now. Their world would be torn apart, their pride shattered, and the humans would emerge victorious. Everything's proceeding according to plan, Jace said, his voice steady. The core's destabilization is at critical levels. The Valari are scrambling to react, but it's too late. Rhea's eyes never left the screen. She could feel the weight of what they had accomplished, but it wasn't satisfaction she felt, it was a strange emptiness. The humans had succeeded where no one else would have dared, but at what cost? The destruction of an entire civilization, the death of thousands, maybe millions, it was all a necessary evil, wasn't it? Or was it something more? Captain, Jace's voice pulled her from her thoughts. The Valari elite guard is approaching. They're not far now. Rhea's eyes hardened. She had expected this. The Valari were resilient, but it was too little, too late. Prepare the team, she ordered. We'll hold them off long enough to finish the mission. We don't stop until the core's gone, and this city is nothing but rubble. She could hear the pounding of boots as her team assembled. The human soldiers, armed and ready, moved like a well-oiled machine. Every one of them knew their role. And for Rhea, it was a moment of pure clarity. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most advanced civilization in the galaxy and come out on top. They had proven their worth. Back at the power core, Selaun and Eluna led a group of elite soldiers through the narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing off the smooth, sterile walls. The air was thick with tension. The core's countdown clock was ticking down relentlessly, the seconds slipping away faster than Selaun would have liked. We're almost there, Eluna said, her voice strained but determined. The core is just ahead. Selaun nodded, but inside, his mind was clouded with doubt. Would they make it in time? The humans were relentless, their strategy so unpredictable that even the Valari, with their eons of experience, couldn't have prepared for this. They had underestimated the human drive, their refusal to submit. And now it seemed that their own arrogance would be their undoing. As they neared the final corridor, a blast shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and Celian's heart skipped a beat. The blast had come from the humans. They were already here. Move! Selaun shouted, pushing ahead. We don't have time to waste. The corridor before them was now a war zone. The Valari soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, were engaged in a fierce firefight with the human forces. The humans didn't hesitate. They shot first, asking questions later. And despite the Valari's superior weaponry, it was clear that the human ferocity and will to survive were winning. Celian's elite guard fought valiantly, but it was like watching a slow-motion collapse. The humans were everywhere, flanking, infiltrating, tearing through their defenses with ease. Celian's gaze flickered across the battlefield, his mind quickly processing the chaos. They're here, Eluna whispered, pointing to a group of human soldiers standing at the far end of the chamber, their weapons trained on the Valari team. Not for long, Selaun muttered, his hands reaching for his own weapon. The battle was far from over. But deep down he knew the odds were not in their favor. Rhea watched from the shadows, her heart racing as she observed the Valari elite guards advance. The final stages of the mission were upon them. She was close, so close to ending this once and for all. But then, as she readied herself for the next move, her communicator buzzed. It was a message from one of her officers. Captain, we have a problem. We've lost control of the core's destabilization. The Valari have regained access. They're attempting to override our systems. Rhea's eyes narrowed. How much time do we have? 10 minutes. Maybe less. Her mind raced. The Valari were fighting back, harder than she had anticipated. But they wouldn't stop her. They couldn't. The humans had come too far to fail now. Prepare the final sequence, Rhea ordered, her voice calm but steely. We're ending this now. No more hesitation. Selaun entered the core chamber, his elite guard following close behind. The room was filled with the sounds of battle, but Celian's focus was absolute. He could see the humans scattered throughout the chamber, their weapons raised, ready to engage. But Selaun had come too far to turn back. He faced Rhea across the room. Their eyes locked for a brief moment, and in that instant, Selaun knew, this was the moment that would define everything. The moment where the Valari either held their ground or fell. Stop, Selaun called out, his voice commanding. You have no idea what you're doing. If you continue this, you'll destroy everything, the entire city, the core, and everything we've worked for. Rhea met his gaze, her face hard, her resolve unwavering. "We didn't come here for your technology, Selon. We came here for something more. To show you that we won't bow to anyone. Not even to the Valari." There was a pause. The two leaders stood in the midst of the chaos, surrounded by soldiers and a dying world. And for a brief moment, Selon wondered, had the humans won after all? With one final movement, Rhea pressed the button. The countdown hit 0. The Valari city trembled, the power core collapsing in on itself, sending a shockwave across the planet. The explosion was blinding, a final testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. The world went silent. The bright, artificial sun that had bathed the Valari capital in its calm, steady light dimmed as the power core's collapse sent shockwaves through the atmosphere. The ground trembled and the city, a jewel of peace and technological advancement, was no more. It had been reduced to dust in an instant. The explosion that followed consumed everything in its path, a violent testament to the clash between two civilizations. For a long, harrowing moment, Rhea stood frozen in place, her eyes wide, watching the devastation unfold in real time. The explosion was unlike anything she had ever witnessed before, its intensity far beyond her calculations. Even in the face of such destruction, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. The mission was complete. The humans had proven their worth, had proven that they were capable of standing against the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. But the victory came at a steep cost. "We did it, Captain," Jace said, his voice shaky as he approached her. "It's over?" Rhea didn't respond immediately. Her gaze was fixed on the remnants of the once mighty city, now nothing more than a smoldering ruin. In the distance, plumes of smoke rose into the sky like dark fingers reaching up, mourning the fall of the Valari. She had always known that war had a cost, but seeing it firsthand, feeling the weight of the lives lost, was something else entirely. She had led her people to victory, but now, standing in the aftermath, she couldn't escape the sinking feeling in her gut. Had they really won? Or had they simply condemned both worlds to a future of endless conflict? "Captain," Jace's voice was urgent now. "The survivors are already regrouping. We have incoming forces, Valari ships, preparing for retaliatory strikes." Rhea snapped out of her daze. She turned to face him, her mind snapping back into strategic mode. "How many?" "At least 3 fleet carriers, likely more hidden in the atmosphere," Jace replied, pulling up a holographic map that highlighted the incoming threats. "They're gathering for a counteroffensive. If we don't act quickly, we might face total annihilation ourselves." Rhea's jaw tightened. She had prepared for many things. This conflict, this mission had been about more than just survival. It had been about sending a message. But now, she had to ensure that humanity didn't fall victim to the very force they had just toppled. "Prepare our fleet," she ordered, her voice steady and resolute. "We'll hold them off no matter the cost. We finished this fight today." On the surface of the Valari homeworld, the dust had begun to settle. The once mighty capital lay in ruins, its towering spires reduced to shattered skeletons of what they once were. A haunting silence enveloped the city, broken only by the distant sounds of fires crackling and debris shifting. The victory, though tangible, felt hollow. The humans had won, but what did that victory mean in the wake of such devastation? Selon stood amid the wreckage, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief. The explosion that had obliterated the heart of their civilization was still fresh in his memory. The sight of their city collapsing, the place where he had once been proud to serve as the voice of the Valari, was a bitter reminder of everything lost. He looked around, his once pristine uniform torn and scorched from the blast, his face gaunt with exhaustion. But there was no time for grief. The Valari had always prided themselves on their resilience. They would rebuild. They would survive. It was all they had left now. Iluna approached him, her expression grave but filled with quiet determination. "Excellency," she said softly, "we've lost everything." Selon turned to her, his eyes steely but pained. "Not everything, Iluna. We still have each other. We still have our minds. We still have our resolve." Iluna nodded, though her eyes betrayed the weight of their shared loss. The Valari had been brought to the brink of extinction by the very forces they had once dismissed as insignificant. Now, standing amidst the ruins of their civilization, they had no choice but to adapt. To survive. "We need to rebuild," Selon said, his voice heavy with the realization that the future of the Valari would be very different from the one they had known. "But we can't do it alone. We'll have to make new alliances. We'll have to learn from this, from the humans." Rhea stood on the bridge of her ship, staring out at the darkened skies above the Valari homeworld. The fight was far from over, but she knew this moment marked a new chapter in their history. She had led humanity to victory, but the victory was bittersweet. The Valari had been defeated, their great city destroyed, but at what cost? Rhea's gaze shifted to the holographic display of her fleet's position, now in orbit above the Valari planet. The remaining Valari fleet was closing in, a final desperate attempt at retribution. She had expected this retaliation. The Valari would not go down without a fight. But that fight, this final battle, was one Rhea intended to win, not just for humanity but for the future of both civilizations. "Captain, the Valari fleet is nearing intercept," Jace reported, his voice tense. "We're almost at full readiness. Should we engage?" Rhea turned to face him, her eyes filled with resolve. "Engage. But remember, our goal isn't annihilation. We've won, Jace. We need to offer them a choice now, peace or ruin." "Understood, Captain." Jace gave a firm nod and relayed the orders to the rest of the fleet. Back on the surface, Selan stood with Eluna at his side, looking up at the sky where human ships hovered above. The Valari had no hope of defeating such an advanced fleet. They had been crushed. And yet, Selan refused to succumb to despair. He had seen the brutality of the humans, but now, amid the ashes of their world, he also saw a glimmer of something else, something unexpected. Rhea had led them to victory, but now she was offering them a choice. A path forward if they were willing to take it. "Excellency," Eluna began, her voice low, "what do we do now?" Selion hesitated, looking up at the distant human ships. He knew that their future was uncertain, that the path ahead would not be easy. But there was one thing he was certain of: the Valari would not survive by clinging to the past. They had to change. They had to evolve. "We rebuild," he said finally. "But we rebuild differently. We learn from the humans. We adapt. We do not repeat the mistakes of our ancestors." Eluna nodded, her face hardening with the same determination that had once defined the Valari. It would be a long road to recovery, but they would walk it. Together. On Rhea's ship, she stood once again before her crew. The battle was over. The Valari had been defeated, but the cost had been immense. Yet in the rubble of their victory she saw the beginnings of something greater. A new future forged not in destruction, but in the willingness to understand, to negotiate, and to forge alliances where once there had been only war. "Prepare the fleet for a meeting with the Valari leaders," Rhea ordered, her voice resolute. "We fought hard, but now it's time to show them who we really are." The war had ended. But the true test, of peace, of rebuilding, was only just beginning. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.